All right, let me start with the introductions. We are so proud to present to you guys Dr. Mark Daniel and Ramona Coleman from the Fort Wayne Community Schools. Their topic is reimagining the education experience for students. Dr. Daniel is a unique superintendent because he's in a district where he graduated from the high school, which is a really cool thing for the community. He's a 1979 graduate of Northside High School in Fort Wayne, and he's the second Fort Wayne alumnus to become the superintendent in the district's history. His first teaching job was at Northside High School. He taught advanced algebra, geometry, business law, accounting, and skills for living, and coached football, basketball, baseball, track, and golf. He left Northside to become an assistant principal at Leo Junior Senior High in 1995, took over as principal in 98, and held that position for 12 years. In 2010, he became superintendent, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, Dowagiac Union Schools in Dowagiac, Michigan, a K-12 district with 2,400 students. In 2014, he was superintendent of McLean County Unit District Number 5 in Normal, Illinois, a K-12 school district with 13,300 students. Ramona started her education career at Taylor Independent School District in Taylor, Texas. In 1983, she was a special ed teacher. She joined Fort Wayne in 1987 and taught at Croninger Elementary School, transitioned to Lane Middle School, and then became a district coach in 2009. She then moved into her current role overseeing the professional learning department. Her current title is Assistant Superintendent of Professional Learning, and it recognizes the importance of the ongoing professional learning needs of new and veteran staff members. So thank you guys. I'm stopping to sharing my screen and you guys take it away.
Well, thank you, Dr. Moss, and it's a pleasure to be here. Again, Ramona and myself, having used defined learning in a couple of districts, we know the importance of project-based learning, but how do you move that across a district? That's the game. And I think the benefits far exceed the struggles. So with that said, let me give you a little bit of a background of our district here in Fort Wayne. We are technically the largest district in the state in regards to total number of students. We have 50 schools, we have magnet programs, we have Montessori schools, we have a new tech. Most recently, we've added what we will call it's a magnet program for 11th and 12th graders, specifically in the area of entrepreneurship. And it's a building that's been refurbished. It was the old General Electric plant in downtown Fort Wayne. And at one time, Fort Wayne, a little bit of trivia here, was on the top 10 bombing lists of Germany during World War II because of the manufacturing and the General Electric plant of electric motors, and as well as wiring and so forth. Very pleased with our graduation rate, but we have much improvement in that area as well. You have some of the other details there. We are a very diverse district. We have a large population, as you can see here, of our, we no longer have a majority. We have a majority minority district, and you can see the demographics there. In regards to our career and technical programs, Indiana, I think, is one of the leaders in the state, or actually Indiana is one of the leaders in the country in this phenomenon in regards to career programming. Our pathways, if you will, as they're called. We do have a regional vocational center housed within our district, and all 5 of our high schools support that program by sending students there for the specialized programs in CTE, as well as other districts around us. So we have that as well. We have a very large ELL program with over 70 languages spoken. A major contributors of that would be our Burmese population. We are the second highest population of Burmese other than Burma itself. I guess it's no longer called Burma. But so here's what we're about in regards to our mission as well as a vision. I always love to hear when we talk about all students and high standards and how are we moving that needle. We are in a voucher state, which is also now moving towards more and more charter influence. So we feel as if we're in a competitive marketplace, And so if we're going to drive choice, we have to have excellent programming. And you can see there the 4 goals of our district, and those are from our board itself. We're also very pleased to say that we are, from a state perspective, and you look at our budget there of 2021, we have the highest in the state in funds spent on instruction as a percentage of total expenditures. So again, I think we're very, should I say, efficient in the use of our dollars and directing them towards student instruction. So why do I think all this, now that you have a background of basically a picture of Fort Wayne, and we're in northern Indiana, northeast Indiana specifically, we're one of the fastest growing communities in the Midwest. The amount of investment by corporations to expand the economic footprint is again, I believe now we're number 2 in the entire Midwest area, if you look at that per capita. So we have a lot of great things going on in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So if you're out there wondering where to move to, come to Fort Wayne. It's a hot spot right now. And I hope we continue to be a driving force in regards to the economic growth. So to make things happen, I think you have to talk about strategic planning. And we've been engaged in a strategic planning process that, as you can see there, we are into using dashboards. We are into what are the academic performances, but also other performances. And how do you continuously use those dashboards to drive decision making? So we use something called StratOp, and here's an example of one of our action initiatives. And again, it's all about strategic planning, but I can tell you I've never had this opportunity to go in this depth of planning as I've had here in Fort Wayne. And this one happens to be about deep planning or deep learning, and what are we trying to get with deep learning? As you can see, the deliverables, where's evaluation plan, where's the comprehensive plan that defines everyday deep learning, and then how are we going to sustain it? So you have a team that then engages in this, and away you go. So we like to see some of these action initiative profiles sunset, but some continue to be driven, and some may be over a course of not just a 3-month, 6-month, but then maybe a 12-month and even beyond. But again, they're written such that we can keep track, we can measure ourselves, and also create accountability. So, as I told you earlier, as when I came to Fort Wayne, one of the things I really wanted to stress was it needs to be a community partnership that's driving our work in our buildings and the engagement of kids. And I think this is well said when you look at this particular description. We have to find new ways to connect our students to the real world. So if that's the case, then we start to speak the language of our business partners. And our business partners, they speak return on investment. So let's talk about return on investment. So to get there, the first thing I did was sit down with the Greater Fort Wayne Chamber of Commerce, and we also have a regional opportunity council as well. So you have regional economic development with Fort Wayne City of Economic Development. And my question was, what are the main drivers in our community? And of those drivers, let's just call it, let's create a particular council called the Human Capital Consortium. Sitting on the Human Capital Consortium then are community leaders from all walks of life, not just the corporate structure, but also from nonprofits and also from other organizations such as our post-secondary partners. Why is that important? Because in the community of Fort Wayne, we believe there are 6 major pipelines that we need to continue to fill. We being that human capital pipeline. So what are they? And I think this is probably true in every community: health services. So as you can see there, teachers, post-secondary partners, higher ed, you have community leaders, health services, very, very important. So we have the major hospitals, representatives of major hospitals on not just the Human Capital Consortium, because that's an overarching group, but you also have committee work. In the committee work, you now have representatives, and those are the doers. Those are the task folks. And they tend to, how are we going to move this needle in regards to health services? We also said advanced manufacturing. And I'm always stressing with my business partners, I'm interested in our high school graduates leaving with either certainly a plan in place, but if they go into workforce, is it a livable wage? Well, we know in both advanced manufacturing as well as trades, there are livable wages to be made. And those are two major areas that we've really dug deeply in. How do we connect those particular pipelines with what's happening in our classrooms? A fourth one would be e-commerce. You may not know this, but Sweetwater is one of the largest distributors of musical equipment and supplies over the entire world, and they're housed here in Fort Wayne. We also have other companies, Ruoff Mortgage, for instance, that is a major competitor with Rocket Mortgage. So entirely an e-commerce. We see this as more and more. Of course, you also have Amazon that's arrived into town. It has 3 major distribution points here in Fort Wayne as well. Now, you then go to IT, data, and analytics. And again, we're very much also a military. We have many companies that are military contractors, and they're very much in need of IT, data, and analytics. And then last but not least, we all are experiencing this across our country, and that's the teacher shortage. So if we believe a pipeline is necessary for those 5, then we also need to have a pipeline for our teaching. And believe me, that has been really interesting, seeing how that's bubbled up and the partnerships that have been formed with, we have Purdue Fort Wayne here and Indiana University here. We have other private schools as well that are here. We have a strong community college. So you can get 2-year degrees through Ivy Tech. So those partnerships, as they're emerging, we're looking more and more into how can our graduates be not just graduates with a high school diploma, but very near to be having their associate's degrees. So a lot of energy and a lot of, should I say, not just energy, but the synergy that's been formed is flowing a very positive way. So just yesterday, and we were looking at what is the ideal graduate profile. And I know many of you have done the ideal graduate profile, but I think every community should be, you have to bring your community members, your leaders together. You also have to bring your students. We heard this from the previous presentation. Bring your students, bring your teachers, bring your administrators, bring your parents, bring your community leaders of all different backgrounds, bring them to bear in this discussion. That to me is so very, very vital. And we did that just yesterday. And we actually used the Ford NGL. So the Ford Foundation helped support this. Again, it's all part of the process, because as I look at this, if you're really going to get to deep learning and sticky learning, you have to connect with real world. And that's why I so much agree with what Michael Fullen has been saying, and why I believe we are a deep learning district and will continue to be so. But then how do you get to the details of deep learning? Well, before we did that, I wanted some type of presentation. So as I go out and meet community members and speak to various groups, I can always start with this type of presentation, which to me, everything begins with culture. If you don't have culture, then you're going to struggle with any type of implementation. So how do you build culture? Well, how do you empower people? How do you collaborate with people? How do you build trust? And we do it within the lens of, in Fort Wayne, we call it shared humanity. And that is, where's equity, where's diversity, and where's where is an inclusion? Where is all this truly coming together? Well, you have to have that as the basis, in my opinion. If you would think of this as an atmosphere, that's our oxygen. That's what feeds our system. And culture will always, always win. And, you know, I'm worked with Dr. Daggett for many years. And as a high school principal, we're one of those schools that we're one of his model schools, as well as a national blue ribbon school. Why? Because we had a culture. And I will always remember this. Bill Daggett would always say, culture trumps everything. Culture trumps everything. But you also have to have an educational philosophy. Do you truly believe that all students can learn and will learn? And you have to be grounded on that fact. And I think we are as a district. I think we do truly believe all students can learn. And now we're at the task of making that happen, which I love the idea of the soft skills. I call them success skills. But again, the 6 C's, which also then, with that as a base, you also then have the 4 elements of deep learning. And we've already talked about learning partnerships. I'll tell you, we're digging very deeply in the learning environments. You have to have a learning environment in each classroom, in each hallway, in each parking lot. And we're struggling with that. And we'll continue to struggle until we have, again, that's part of the whole community discussion around the ideal graduate. That will drive some of what we're talking about learning environment. Then also pedagogical practices and leveraging digital. Now, we've all been accelerated in regards to leveraging digital. And how is that really, how do we truly create synchronous learning? How do we expand our classrooms beyond the 4 walls? And I think we're about that right now. We're getting better at it, but we can always improve. Now, I talked to you a little bit about, as we looked at the pipelines and pathways, I truly believe we are in the midst of, we have diverted all of our Title I dollars into our elementary schools. And that's how in Indiana, I have to fund pre-K. Pre-K is vital. I wish the state legislator would come to this importance and say, we're going to start funding pre-K. But until they do, we're having to rethink some of our Title I funding. But early learning and some unbelievable partnerships are being formed both from the private sector as well as the school system. Also, the whole idea of K-12 project-based learning. We do that with defined learning, which is a great tool, but we also do that with junior achievement. And we have one of the nationally recognized, probably the top 5 junior achievement programs in the entire country. Why is that so important? Because that provides the network of bringing real world into the classrooms. And we've opened up our doors and are absolutely encouraging and trying to facilitate that partnership. We have something called the 8th grade experiential learning, which is actually a donation that was created with the Boys Club, Girls Club. We'll have all our 8th graders going through an experiential lab based on our 6 pipelines. So that's fantastic. I love that. And I actually moved that one. I think I may have. Sorry about that. All right. So getting back to this particular one right here. Okay, keeps on. There we go. All right. So I have this. Okay. She's helping me out here. So this 8th grade experiential lab, I just have to tell you, I love this concept. We use some of our Gear Up dollars to do this, but now we're also creating mobile labs, converting buses, and we'll be taking those to all of our 11 middle schools. So now 6th through 8th grade could have experiential learning in the career clusters the 16 career clusters, and specifically in the pipelines that we talked about earlier. Also, the whole idea of how do we provide certifications and stackable credentials, we're knee deep in that. We have adopted 3DE. So all of our high schools will now be utilizing 3DE, which if you're not familiar with that, that is a national program sponsored by Junior Achievement, which is creating thematic instruction happening in your core subjects wrapped around real world activities. So I think it's taking, again, defined learning and project-based learning and taking it to another level. We also have what we call an AMP lab. I may have said this before. AMP lab was a GE building. Again, we have, we'll start that next year, 400 student capacity. We're at 400 students. So definitely the students saw this as a need. And what are they doing there? Entrepreneurship, innovation. They'll take a concept and take it all the way to actual product implementation cycle. So really excited about that. And they're sitting right there in a building with businesses surrounding them. So that's a huge complex that the city as well as the state came together and with business sector, private sector, phenomenal. Then finally, again, what are we doing in the whole college and career workspace? And ideally, I would love to have all students by the time they've graduated some type of internship or mentorship. Now, it's not what I am familiar with as a high school principal, but some type of networking and connecting. So our truly graduate with a meaningful future plan. So that's the idea there. And don't know if I'm getting this. Yep, we're still rolling, I think. Yeah, so it all comes together. And we had to sort of look at our whole, if you will, our MTSS system of instruction. And you can see that it's no longer a triangle, it's a quadrilateral, because we truly believe there are major components that need to be both on the, shall I say, our high achieving students and as well as our struggling students. So as you can see here, yes, we have our core. So what is at our core? Literacy and numeracy. Keep it simple. Literacy is a driving force for us in our district. But how do I get to literacy and numeracy? I can get to that through project-based learning, because that's the engagement piece. That's what I tell teachers. Have fun with what you're doing, and please focus on numeracy and literacy. And that can be across all subjects, all grade levels. And of course, we can't do just the academic side. You also have to have the well-being side of our students. And I don't know about you, but in regards to, I'll call it spike behavior, we have never seen the type of behavior we've seen this year with our students returning after the COVID phenomenon. And we even had hybrid work last year. So we had students in our buildings, but we had in high school about a third of them every day. Now they're all together, but we're seeing it even in kindergarten. And it's something, if we do not address, we have to address this piece. So again, what are the various tiers of schools within schools within schools, if you will? And quite frankly, we've now become the mental health institution for adolescents and youth. And I don't think that's proper. We're not trained to do that, but we're also having to spend our ESSER dollars as well as Title I dollars in regards to therapists and so forth from a mental health side. So a lot of, we are always challenged and we always have opportunities to grow. But I think we have systems in place that are addressing the needs of our kids. We are very data driven, and I'm very pleased that we're data driven today. And one of the major pieces that I truly believe has to happen, we have to have the real world connection. That's why we went from 0 students in AMP lab to 400 capacity in less than, I believe it was less than 3 months, because students are eager for, give me the real world connections. So I'm now turning over this PowerPoint now to my colleague, Ramona Coleman. Again, she's our Assistant Superintendent of Professional Learning. And as a large district, we do much of our own professional learning. And she's leading that with her team, and they're great at what they do. So Ramona, if you would, please. You're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Daniel, for sharing with us where we are with the development of human capital. I do want to bring attention to the title that's there on the slide, Fort Wayne Community Schools Vision. And so today we really want to approach learning from the lens of utilizing project-based learning to transform deep learning. Well, I've had the opportunity along with many of you today to listen to a lot of great presenters, amazing presenters, speaking to task performance, performance task, project-based learning, the 6 C's, the 4 E's. So I just want you to take a few moments, please, to look at the question that's there on the slide. As you think about all of the learning that you've engaged in today, I want you to take the time to use the chat box and respond to this question. As leaders, what business are we really in today? And I can see Cindy's already pointed us toward the future. Thank you for contributing. Preparing our kids for tomorrow, student success. More for the future. I love that for what hasn't been created yet. Future leadership. Future desires. Wow, empathy and critical thinkers. Students and staff with the tools they need. All right, I just want to thank everyone for adding their voice to the larger group. And please continue if you have a thought that you would like to add to the question. And so I think in the next slide, looking at when we think about our future leaders, Dr. Daniel previously shared around the 4 elements and the 6 C's. I could not speak to this work or articulate the deepness of this work without really acknowledging Dr. Fullen and his team, who did extensive work in our district around deep learning, everyday deep learning. So again, I'm really appreciative of Dr. Matt Gardner and Joanne Quinn for the work they did with FWCS in regards to transforming deep learning, everyday deep learning. Let's talk a little bit more about our 4 elements. I look at them as almost outputs of the elements to the 6 C's. And so Dr. Daniel, when we focused on human capital management and the framing of human capital management, we really looked at our pedagogical practices, and at this time really looking at what effective strategies do we truly feel that we need to place in front of our teachers and our students to ensure that our students are going to meet the outcomes that's necessary for them to be successful. Learning partnerships, we did talk about human capital management and those external partnerships, along with the partnerships that teachers learn alongside each other within their classrooms and at their buildings. We also wanted to stress the importance of really ensuring that teachers are able to collaborate with each other across district based upon best practices being implemented. We know in order for that to occur is that we really have to look at leveraging digital. And then for us in leveraging digital, we wanted to go back to that sticky learning that Dr. Daniel spoke about earlier, and also to make sure that with leveraging digital, leveraging technology, that we were not looking at technology just as a consumption in our district, but really looking at technology, really looking at the lens of technology, of how we truly use it, leveraging digitally to impact the learning of our students pre-K through 12. One of the ways that we've done that is truly trying to utilize the platform or the resource of defined learning in order to help teachers in the creation of project-based learning or projects that they can use within the curriculum. Learning environments is something that we made a shift this current school year. Dr. Daniel spoke about the culture and that being a priority and that being a first. So we knew that in order to focus on pedagogical practices, learning partnerships, and leveraging digital that we truly had to make the nucleus for us, the center learning environment, really focusing on the well-being of our adults as well as our students to ensure that we would have successful implementation of our curriculum for the well-being side and the academic side. So again, today there has been lots of discussion around the 6 C's. I want to be very transparent with participants today. For us as a district, we are a deep learning district, an everyday deep learning district. I also want to speak to, there's been questions around the philosophy of deep learning and how do you truly integrate everyday deep learning or the 4 E's and the 6 C's into the curriculum every day. Well, let's just make it simple. We think about project-based learning, and as we think about the project or the larger project at the end, I want you to think about the 6 C's that's on the screen before you. We want students every single day to be able to answer the question, how do I use my own creativity? How am I as a learner being a critical thinker? How do I communicate effectively with my peers? How do I engage in a collaborative atmosphere with other team members in my classroom? And we know that when we focus on collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking, it's going to lead our students and have them to focus more on that positive character that we want. When we said, looking at the chat box again, preparing for the future that we don't even know yet, when we think about everyday deep learning, when we think about project-based learning, really students being able to bring their voice, articulate their voice on what's important, what's paramount for them to truly understand and make those connections to real world applications. I think if we take the philosophy and we make it simple, and not only just for our teachers and our students, but collaboratively as a team, how do we simply focus on the how of when we're engaging students and content, when we're designing curriculum together in teams, really truly focusing on what opportunities are you creating for students to be collaborative with each other? What opportunities are you creating for students to be able to communicate effectively, to be creative, and ultimately to be critical thinkers and apply those skills and real world application? So here's a shift. Dr. Daniel, Superintendent of Fort Wayne Community Schools, really looked at our curriculum and said, I think we may need to do something different. Because if we're really saying that we are a deep learning or an everyday deep learning district, this is what it means to me. When you really utilize project-based learning to transform deep learning, it drives students' passion. It drives students' passion and their engagement. And it truly brings the curriculum to life. So I want to move back a little bit to share with you that prior to Dr. Daniel making this powerful statement that I feel, this is where we were. So we had a curriculum that was basically, when I look at my screen, the box to the left, we had a curriculum that was teacher created by selected teachers. It was very prescriptive. It was day 1, this is the standard we want you to teach. Day 2, this is what we want you to do. And this is where we want you to be by the end of the quarter. I do, we do, you do. There was really very minimal teacher's voice. And then the lack of integration, when we go back to the 4 E's, and the 6Cs, there wasn't a connectedness that was there. So our teachers were like screaming, Ramona, how do you expect for us to do deep learning or everyday deep learning? And we do not have the autonomy to use our voice in the design of what impactful curriculum should truly look like. Also, if we have a scripted curriculum that tells us what to do on day 1, what to do on day 2, then how can we embed project-based learning or performance tasks within that curriculum? So it comes back to the quote. How can we make it rich? How can we make it engaging? How can we be more intentional and deliberate about adding teachers' voice? So let's move to the right. Dr. Daniel shared his thoughts, and we said, let's make a shift that's going to be really impactful for our teachers and really impactful for our students. So again, another group of teachers were chosen. We wanted to create exemplars for teachers to use, for teachers to have before them, but not per se for teachers to be able to say, this is what I have to use starting day 1. They could, because these exemplars were really created, and they were really created in a cohesive way that most teachers, most unit heads, most principals, they wanted to use them as central office teams and teachers that come together from their buildings to create. Why? Because now teachers felt like they had autonomy. The teachers felt like their voice was included. Teachers could understand and start asking the questions, and they could see more clearly the integration of the 4 elements and the 6 Cs, and it wasn't scripted. And then we went back and they said, wow, we really would like to have a scope and sequence. What is it that we truly want our students to accomplish when it comes to the college and career ready standards for quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4? Well, this is something amazing that happened. With teachers' autonomy and being very specific around the pedagogy, around the strategies that we wanted our teachers to have the exposure to, is that we had a scope and sequence, and then really wanting to integrate everyday deep learning or project-based learning. Again, we use defined learning as a resource, continuing to use that resource as of today. And we wanted them to take this scope and sequence and say, based upon the vast amount of projects that students and teachers have available to them through defined learning, our question was, or our ask was, please align the projects pre-K through 12 based upon our scope and sequence. Align them to where kindergarten teachers, first grade teachers, secondary, elementary would see how the resources within defined learning aligned with our scope and sequence. So what did this mean for our teachers? First, it meant less, because instead of me having to really dig deep and think about as I'm teaching or facilitating learning around these critical standards, priority standards, here is a resource that Dr. Daniel made available for them that they could easily access to see that here are specific projects that we can use with our students. But it was more than that. We know that project-based learning is something too that we need intensive professional learning around, because we want our teachers to understand how and what tools, what resources, what is it that you need in place to design rigorous projects for students to have impactful outcomes at the end. And how would we know if they were impactful if we didn't have common assessments to gauge where our students were, and not waiting for a state level assessment? But this was students' voice, teachers' voice every day. And especially when we use those periodic assessments, quarterly assessments, that we could assess and then basically align that to where we thought our students would be when it would come to our state level assessment. So again, I kind of talked about professional learning a little bit. And this is a process, or a process that we're in, and still know that we still have work, lots of work to do. But I like this quote from Dr. Mike Smoker. When we really think about our schools having a really guaranteed literacy rich curriculum, we have to really look at what's being taught, what's being facilitated. So from my lens, professional learning, we had to look at the model that's before you. What is it that we truly wanted leadership to focus on? Dr. Daniel spoke about literacy, numeracy, and well-being. How could we ensure that based upon the focus of literacy, numeracy, and well-being, that we were going to provide our teachers and our leaders, our coaches, the structure, the platform for them to use and increase in their capacity to support their students and to support each other as adult learners. So part of that again was connecting with defined learning and really looking at PBL. And this is a part that we're going to push even more this coming school year, is having our coaches, our quality improvement teams to really engage in asynchronous learning, where they can learn more of what is PBL, how do I really look at and design performance tasks, and not only engage in that work, but engage in that work with experts, and then engaging them to become train the trainers with each other based upon the micro credentials through the defined learning platform, that they can share that knowledge with others. From that, we wanted to make sure when we go back and look at our curriculum, and we want to look at project-based learning, and definitely having the tool of defined learning for our teachers to use, what professional learning did we want to put in the hands of our teachers? So I took a gamble. I don't know whether it was the right gamble. I'll find out. But this was around, let's start with the boots on the ground. Let's go directly to the teachers and see if we can influence the teachers and having them to influence administration on the importance of using a resource that would be beneficial to them, that was aligned to our scope and sequence and to the curriculum that we were asking them to facilitate. So we offered sessions for teachers, or we made available sessions for teachers for 3 weeks. Right when school started, we took a pause, then we did another 3 weeks, and we kind of do this on a continuous basis, and not saying it's mandatory, not saying that you have to do it, but really we wanted to make this available for teachers and to give them the opportunity to engage in conversations around project-based learning, and to see how they would take this back to their classrooms, since now they have the autonomy that they asked for, and how they would align specific projects within the curriculum, within the scope and sequence that was made available to them. And so this for us was really about coherence and alignment, and using project-based learning to really elevate the outcomes for our students. So the question was posed by the school board, well, how do you know this works? How do you know that project-based learning is really going to make a difference? For me, the answer came back to, we know that when we focus on the 4 E's, we know that when we focus on the output of the 6 C's, and we surround that with project-based learning, that it will have an impact. And so we just started basically baseline data, a collection around, is this truly working? So on the screen before you, you can see that our initial data review, and this was really beginning of the year to middle of the year data that you're looking at, but we really was looking at growth data. So you can see that there was a correlation, a 0.5 correlation between the use of defined learning and growth within our schools. Then we went back to examine that data. Our chief of systems went back to examine the data to really look at the top 5 schools that were high-end users of a resource that we had provided for the use of project-based learning. And so we know that the growth percentile of those top 5 schools, you were looking at a percentile of 58.27 for our top 5 schools that actually said, I do want to use this. And we can see the difference with project-based learning that it's making with our students. One of the top 5 users, this specific school, Bloomingdale Elementary, that I want to highlight, is a complex Title I school. Over 79% of their students participate in our National School Lunch Program. Look at the growth percentile for that high complex school. And I know here today, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I know that project-based learning works. And the data that's before you, it shows that project-based learning works. We have to have traditional learning, but we also have to have transformational learning. We have to have the sticky learning that works. We have to have the foundations of literacy in place. And with the foundations of literacy in place, we have to push our students even more, push our adult learners even more. And we have to have them to have our students engage more. And through that engagement, we truly see as a district that project-based learning is an avenue that we want to continue to grow upon. If you look at the last point there, the middle school, with the highest participation of defined learning, was our new virtual academy. I'm so glad that our chief of systems included this bullet point for us today, because based upon the pandemic world that we've lived in, at the time, a lot of us were trying to figure out, how are we going to make this work? How do we continue to engage students in the conversations around the 4 E's and the 6 C's and see the importance of the connecting to get to that outcome or that culminating project that we're wanting them to do? So we can see for this year, with our virtual academy, their percentile growth, 58.63. So this is just the initial data review of us truly looking at project-based learning and trying to assess as a district if it's really being impactful to our students. So what's our next steps? Where do we go from here? Well, we really are going to work with another learning technology evaluator to further evaluate the impact of project-based learning. And since we've made the investment of utilizing defined learning, we really want to see what's the correlation, continue to see if there's an impact of project-based learning and also the resources that defined learning is making available to us through their platform. So I wanted to end before we open up for questions or anything else. I really wanted to focus on teacher voice. So the quantitative data is there, and we can see that we're moving in the right direction. However, I wanted to make sure with our teachers if we're moving in the right direction. So I want you to take the time to look at some of the quotes. And these are specific quotes from our teachers. The quotes that you see there, again, I want to go back and reiterate that district-wide, our teachers have the option of attending PL sessions during the day, prior to the school day, and after school. The teacher voices that you see the words on the screen. This was based upon professional learning that they volunteered to attend after school. The professional learning was around connecting project-based learning via the source defined learning. And so here it was specific projects that defined learning shared with our teachers and shared with them the process that they could go back and use with their students in the classroom. What our teachers really liked was the customization, that not only were there projects that were already well designed, where you could really look to see how can I get my students to collaborate? How can I get my students to be critical thinkers? How can I get my students to be creative? But also the opportunity where they could customize and even add to, or maybe take away from some of the projects that were there. So again, coming back to Dr. Daniel's quote, I think for us as a district, it's really our focus is culture first. Moving to the focus of literacy, numeracy, and well-being. And truly, how do we use project-based learning for that connectedness? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel and Ramona. It was wonderful for you to share the story of all the great work you're doing in Fort Wayne. And I love the way you're providing for the Coalition of the Willing, the people who want to go first get the chance to go first, because we all know from COVID that teachers jumped right in the deep end and they're not afraid to try new things. They're just afraid of being left without support. And you guys are supporting them with professional learning. You're supporting them with resources. Has there been one grade level of teachers who've been most willing to jump in, like K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, or one group that's been most resistant? I was a high school teacher and we tend to be much more resistant to interdisciplinary experiences.
I would say, Cindy, based upon the data for right now, it's definitely our elementary teachers that are using the resource. However, I can say for you, when it comes to project-based learning, that commitment is throughout the district. And I think, again, we look at 3DE and the other components that we're introducing. I think here is our why. So Dr. Daniel talked about 3DE and so how that connects to real world and the human capital management. We want to make sure that prior to our students moving into middle school and high school, that we're definitely making sure from pre-K on up that we're framing or setting that foundation for them to have that skill set at the secondary and high school level. And I don't know, Dr. Daniel, if you would want to say anything different.
Yes, and I'd agree with that. We also have an elementary school that wants to next year have a heavy emphasis on project-based learning, specifically using defined learning and the importance of embedding these options in the scope and sequence. And I think Ramona spoke to that. So teachers are not out there searching and scrambling and spending countless number of hours in creating these PBL units. Instead, they will now be able to access by standard, by where their particular kids are, and based on even their leveled literacy, where they are in their reading levels. So again, very excited about this school because it has over 85 to 90% poverty. And this staff has been asking the question, what can we do? What can we do to move these kids? And quite frankly, I think they were struggling and their teacher efficacy was at an all-time low. So they have some new hope. They have some new, should we say, ideas to move forward. And now it's teacher-led, which I couldn't, teacher and principal takes two, takes both the principal and the teachers. But boy, that is very, very exciting. So as Ramona said, definitely the elementary folks have grabbed this a bit more, should I say, grabbed it a bit more than the secondary folks, but I expect that.
Yeah, well, and Dr. Daniel and Ramona, as well as other people on the webinar, we are running an in-person experience this summer, a deep dive into PBL, defined learnings PBLs. And I will send you information about it. I'd love for you to send a team to come spend a whole week with us, becoming experts on how to use these and thinking about how to embed them all. It's called PBL Champ Camp for the rest of you guys. And we will, in the follow-up email, send you a link to sign up for it. And it's for principals, teachers, curriculum people to come and leave at the end of the week really an expert at how to use these PBLs and maximize them within your scope and sequence. Are you guys, so you have a really great plan for teachers. What are you doing? If you expect teachers to teach differently, administrators have to lead differently. How are you training your administrators?
So thank you, Cindy, for asking. And I think the big shift for us, you're absolutely correct. And that's the reason I said, when I first took a gamble. So starting with the teachers on the ground, right? So even though those teachers have a high energy level and they're interested, they have to have support when they go back to the building. And building principals and administrators have to buy in to the PL and what you're asking of teachers. We changed the structure of our leadership and our professional learning just for that reason. We have an excellent group of administrators at the central office. We refer to them as our PAC team. So it's our curriculum coordinators, professional learning coordinators, technology coordinators. So they all coordinate, they all plan, and they design professional learning for the building level for leadership and our coaches together. So they first take all of the PL, they facilitate it with leadership first. And then they take it to the coaches, our instructional coaches. And then our instructional coaches become the voices in the building to share the PL with their teacher leaders and with their teachers with the support of the building principal. And along with that, we also wanted to make sure that we share with our building principals what to look for. So it's not only engaging them in the PL, but also supporting them with, as you're in the building and in classrooms with teachers, how do you know if this is being implemented well and it's going to change outcomes for students?
That was amazing. You guys, it makes us all want to come to Fort Wayne and work with you and for you as you move forward in this transformational work. I think we're going to stop at this point. Give us a few minutes if people need to run to the restroom or grab something else to drink. But thank you so much for all the work you're doing and for sharing with us. And we look forward to our last session, which will begin in 4 minutes. And we have Michael Fullen and Mark Edwards. So thanks again, Fort Wayne. Great job. Keep up the good work.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a good rest of the afternoon.
Thanks.